My name is Rich Reddick, Dr. Rich Reddick. I'm the Senior Vice Provost for Curriculum and Instruction and Enrollment. I know my own title. And Dean of Undergraduate Studies here at UT Austin. I'm also a professor. It says long time. I don't want to say how long it was. I'm a professor in higher education leadership. I'm also a professor in African Diaspora Studies and also in the Plan 2 Honors Program in liberal arts. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the second lecture in the Spring 2023 Helen and Jeff Herbert Family University Lecture Series, brought to you through a generous gift from Helen and Jeff Herbert. We want to thank the Herberts for their entire family for making this event possible. So we're gathered here tonight to immerse ourselves in the knowledge that benefits us all and moves the university community forward and our larger community as well. Many of us here tonight have already experienced the power of service. Service not only makes us feel part of a larger community, but it also helps that larger community to thrive so that it in turn can serve others. These ripple effects create a healthy society. Thus, I am honored to introduce our speaker tonight, Professor Cossy Hough. Cossy Hough, LCSW, pronounced she, her, is a clinical associate professor and assistant dean for undergraduate programs at the University of Texas at Austin, Steve Hicks School of Social Work. This is where the social work folks represent themselves. There you go. All right. Small but mighty. She has been a social worker in Texas for over 30 years. She joined the UT faculty in 2009 after working in the social work field as a public health and hospice social worker and as an administrator for a statewide Medicaid program for children and pregnant women with health conditions. Her professional interest areas are social work education, generalist and macro social work, racial equity, undergraduate education, public health, homelessness, housing insecurity, and income inequality, disabilities in both child and adulthood, and safety net programs in the United States, including Medicaid. Hough received the National Association of Social Workers Media Award for a 2016 Fort Worth Star-Telegram column, "Social Workers Can Play a Role in a Corporate Setting." Professor Hough is a Longhorn to the core, earning both her Bachelor of Social Work and her Master of Social Science and Social Work. Master of Science in Social Work at UT Austin. Let's cheer for her for that. One of us. Cossy grew up in El Paso, Texas. West Texas in the house, anybody? West Texas? Well, there's somebody here. They're very reserved, Cossy. And she has lived in Austin since 1989. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with family and the rescued pug mixes, and camping, cooking, reading, and seeing local live music in Austin as much as possible. Big week for you ahead. Yes. We are thrilled to have her with us tonight. Finally, before we begin, I want to remind you that during the talk, you should be sending us questions for Professor Hough by using the QR code on the slide behind me, or will be behind me at some point, also posted around the auditorium. After the lecture, we'll be asking a few of your questions to the professor, so please remain seated once the lecture is concluded. Welcome, Professor Hough.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Reddick. I'm so happy to be here tonight. I did see one person in a social work sweatshirt come in. Anyone else? Social work majors? Another social work major, great. Okay. We're small, but we're mighty. We do a lot of good stuff. So as we're getting started, if you can, if you haven't been on this Slido yet with this QR code, please go on there. I'll explain why you're answering this question in a little bit. But just take a minute, it's just one question to kind of get us started. I'm so excited to be here tonight and to be talking about this topic, and I was thrilled when undergraduate studies asked me to come and talk about it because, as you probably would guess from social work, we're working in communities all the time. That's where our work happens, that's where a lot of our education happens, and so making the community our classroom is kind of what we're all about. So really excited to be talking about this topic. this is how we're going to kind of be spending our time together this evening. So I want to spend some time with some basic definitions and also thinking about what a community classroom looks like and how that could maybe apply to you and your major, even if it's not social work. There's a lot of work that can be done in community in lots of different ways. We're going to talk some about civic engagement, and this is part of the reason for your Slido question. And the relationship between civic engagement and community connections and making community your classroom. We're going to talk some about what makes community learning meaningful and also some of the barriers to it. There are definitely barriers, including time and money, and we're going to talk through some of that. And we're definitely going to spend some time talking about career exploration and development through community classrooms as opposed to classrooms like this one that you're used to learning in. We're going to do this a couple of different ways. So we're going to be definitely talking through and defining some of these concepts, but then I'm also going to be giving you some examples, some resources and some options, and some of this information is going to come from students themselves. I had a couple of students who were open to talking with me and recording, and I have some video to show you so that you can get, I think it's really important to hear from students themselves when you're thinking about these concepts. All right, so first of all, a definition of community classroom, and this is one that I just came up with based on experiences that I've had and also the type of opportunities that are available for you as far as learning in the community. So work, study, or research done within the community by a student or group of students in which the outcome is mindfully tied to academic learning and or growth. And there are some terms that I think that are really important here, and we're going to continue to explore these, but of course community would be one that is really important. This mindfully tied is really important, and you're going to hear me talk about this some when I talk about service learning as opposed to volunteer work. So you could go out and volunteer within your community and have an experience that may or may not be that impactful for you, that isn't tied to your education at all, that is not tied to your learning or who you're thinking about becoming as a college student. And what we're talking about here when we talk about community classrooms is making sure that it's mindfully tied to your education and your growth. So you are having experiences where you're taking a look and seeing, these are places I might fit, these are places I don't fit. The reflection about what you're doing and how you're doing it and how it's tied to your growth as a college student is important. That's what makes it a community classroom. It can look lots of different ways though. So let's talk about a few of the ways that it can look. So, and you notice that I've said here that all of these things are tied to community and to growth related to your education. You're going to hear a lot of terminology in some of this you've probably already heard. I've already mentioned volunteering once. That's probably the most common kind of community classroom that is out there. But there are lots and lots of different ways that you can participate in community learning. Study abroad is really common, so for either going for a Maymester, a month, or for a longer semester, and having that education out of the classroom, being in a different country in a completely different environment. Definitely volunteering is a way to get that experience in a community classroom, and that could be within your area of study or outside of your area of study. And we're going to talk some about really following what your passions are when you're doing this work, and how learning can happen even if it's not tied exactly to what you're studying in the classroom or what your future career is. Tied closely to that is service learning. And by the way, we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but some of these terms get intermixed and used for various opportunities. So it's really important to focus more on the opportunity than it is rather than what it's called, to get a clear idea of what you're looking for. Traditionally, service learning is learning that is tied to a classroom that includes some, it can kind of look like volunteer work, but it's tied to classroom assignments and reflection and learning in the classroom. And that really is what makes it different. You might have shorter types of experiences that can be considered community learning. If you're in a classroom setting and you're working on a project with the instructor, maybe the instructor is either bringing in folks from the community in your area of study to work on an experiential project together, or you're going out into the community. Let's say you're doing some work, out in the community around whatever topic kind of you're studying in class, but you're working with folks who are doing community work instead of academic work. And so these experiences can be short. They don't have to be this, committing to a long period of time. You can be pursuing classes that have projects that are more experiential or other types of experiential learning. And experiential learning is really applied learning, so that you're doing instead of just learning about doing it. And you have opportunities to do the work right then. The same could kind of be said of practice or clinical skills. Do we have any nursing majors here? A few nursing majors. You'll definitely be completing clinical work in the community. How about education? Any education majors? Couple, okay. You'll be teaching. So there's some of you that are already in a professional school, and you're going to be getting, you're going to be participating in community learning automatically, because it's part of what you're learning as your major. And then others of you are going to need to look for it a little harder. Research is another way that you can really get involved in community classrooms. There's a lot of ways. There's a lot of community partnerships between the university and instructors and students and research that's going on either off campus or sometimes on campus in labs. And this is true even at the undergraduate level. Undergraduate Research Week is coming up April 3rd through 7th. I encourage you to take a look online if you haven't before. There's lots of talks and different activities to celebrate research and how you might be able to get involved. And that really gives you a chance to seeing research kind of bring some of the topics you're learning in classes to life. Let me see, other things I want to talk about on here. I think those are we're going to talk a lot about internships coming up, because I think internships are one of the most common sets of terminology used for community learning, and I also think that internships can be really misunderstood. Participating in an internship, completing one during summer or during the long sessions certainly is type of community learning. But internships, everybody's calling everything internships right now, so it's important to kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Okay. So we're going to start hearing from the students that I was able to talk with some about their community classroom experiences. 3 students, and I have just a little bit of information from each one of them, and then you'll hear a little bit more from them as we go on. All right, so this is Logan. We've worked together on a couple of different ways you've volunteered or kind of learned from the community. Can you tell us a little bit about what that has looked like for you so far?
Yeah, for sure. So in our first class in social work, 310, the service learning I did was with, I think it's called Texas Election Protection. It was basically being a poll monitor at the polls to make sure there wasn't like voter intimidation, electioneering, making sure safety protocols, or especially at the time for COVID, were held. And doing that was interesting for me. It taught me in one sense about like understanding the election policies, procedures, laws. It's been really interesting, especially for someone that's kind of interested in like the legal side of things. And understand that context was really important, especially since voting is something that's whatever major field you're interested in is something that's important. So that was interesting to learn, especially through like the volunteering and training that we had to do about the background of elections. And then another experience, which actually started with you in the 312 class in fall 2021, as I was with One Service Alliance, and I'm still with them today, to this day. And what was it was basically like learning about getting that background with like the legal background. For context, One Service Alliance is post-conviction appeals for youth, and a lot of times we take cases that are very much like there's an injustice or something like that, a youth was over sentenced. These are all the kids' cases, so that's what we deal with. So from that, I gained like legal backgrounds for all that, and also how the criminal justice system like affects communities, social groups within, understanding what problems do they have, which is really like it would really inform me as if I go into that social practice of like people that are in prison or out of prison, what are their needs and what is the best way to help them. So just give me a better understanding of that community.
So that's info from Logan. We're going to hear from a couple other students who you're going to hear from more too. This is Idala Gutierrez.
Idali, we've talked some about, you've done quite a bit of volunteer work for classes and outside of classes. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done and how it intersects with what you're passionate about?
Yeah, so I've done 3 years of service learning. So my 3 semesters of service learning. So I've done my very first semester, I worked as a voter deputy to try to get people to register to vote around Travis County. And I also worked in early voting and presidential elections that year, because that was back in 2020 when we were doing the presidential elections. So I worked that entire, it was probably 2 months. I worked the first month as a voter deputy, and then I worked at the polls. So it was a really great experience for me. And after that, for the next, I'm still a registered Texas voter deputy. And so I did that for another semester as well. And then I also worked with SWAD, which is Social Work Advocacy Day. So it's actually, when I worked it was online because it was still COVID time. And, you know, I just helped them try to get everything going online. It was a new process for everybody. That was her first year doing everything online. So it was definitely an experience. But this year it'll be in person, so that'll be really interesting to go see. And I've always stuck to doing something with like advocacy or like voting, because I have learned that a lot of people that are, you know, underpopulated or in the lower income, you know, places here in UT, they don't register to vote and they don't vote. And this happens, and I've seen it in Austin, I've seen it in El Paso as well, because I'm from El Paso. And I noticed that, you know, a lot of the times, especially Latinos, we don't register to vote. And a lot of the times it's because we don't know how. Our parents might be in the older generations and they don't know how to register to vote, or they don't know who to vote for, and they don't know, you know, what's going on. So that to me was really, you know, an opening point for me, because I really wanted to be able to help my community.
Okay, we're going to hear from one final student. And by the way, I just noticed that there was a captioning error, and when Logan was talking, he does not work for the Insurgency Alliance. He works for Lone Star Justice Alliance. That's a pretty big catch there. Okay, and then finally, Madeline.
So I am a senior social work student. I am from New Jersey. I got involved with Socks for the Soul when I was a freshman for my service learning requirement for one of my intro to social work classes, and I've held several different roles in the organization and am currently the co-president of the organization.
That's amazing, that's amazing. Tell us a little bit about what Socks for the Soul is about.
Socks for the Soul is a nonprofit and student organization made up primarily of social work students, but we have people from all different majors. And the goal is to provide socks and other under-donated essentials for unhoused individuals in the Austin community. So we work with different sock companies who donate socks to us, and then we work with other organizations around Austin that are providing services for the unhoused community. And we go to those organizations and their events and distribute our socks and any other items we may have.
So hopefully this gave you just some ideas and maybe started getting you thinking about where you might fit in terms of doing some community learning on your own. And we're going to talk some about really linking what community classrooms you would be interested in being a part of, and making sure that there's a really good fit between you and that work and what you're passionate about. Which I think you'll see as a theme through this and hearing from the students and thinking about what you might want to do. Okay, so we're going to talk some about, start getting into kind of the reason that you would do this and the importance of it at the same time. So it's really important, I think, to think about the interplay between you as an individual and your community as you're thinking about doing this work. So you not only are going to be doing work in the community where you're being shaped by the community and the classroom that you're participating in the community and the type of work that you're doing, but you're also going to be in turn shaping that community. And you know, probably a lot of y'all came here today thinking, okay, what can I get out of you know, building my resume and my career and thinking about my goals and moving forward and being successful once I graduate. And those are all great reasons to participate in experiential learning or community learning. And there are also these kind of collective community reasons that it's a really good idea to participate in community learning that we don't talk about as often. And one of those is that you all are shaping the community that you're in. And I think this is true, this is just my opinion, but I think that this is true right now more than any other time that I've seen in my lifetime. And I think that is because you all as college students are coming into college with a lot of introspection and knowledge about your lived experiences as primarily younger people in the United States right now. And I think that a lot of the community partners that we have are really seeing that and seeing that you all are the generation that is going to shape change in the world. And that might sound a little aspirational, but I really believe it. And so, you know, I do think that the community is looking for college students to also be impacting what they're doing. And so it really is an interplay. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So individual learning, there definitely are things for you to learn in the community. The most common is to be thinking about your area of study and skill development. Perhaps you are thinking about an internship. You're thinking about working with somebody who is maybe doing the job that you aspire to do someday. And that is great. So you're learning general skills and knowledge. Hopefully you are working in an area where you feel really passionate about it. And it's somewhat related to your area of study. I have known quite a few students who have started working in a community classroom and then decided to change their area of study. So, that's another topic, but if you are in an area of study and you're feeling absolutely no passion or drive for it at all, that's something else to look at. Starting with some work in a community classroom might give you a little bit more information. So we're going to talk more about individual benefits of completing community educational work in a few minutes, but the individual side of things is really, I think, what has primarily been focused on in the United States as far as internships and development and growth. So now I want to spend some time talking about collectivism as opposed to individualism. I'm hoping that the term collectivism is not a new term to you, depending on where you grew up and how you grew up and who you are and who your family is, collectivism might be more of a familiar value system for you. In the US, we're shaped a lot by individualism and, people kind of succeeding on their own. But community classroom work has a lot to do with collectivism. And so I grabbed a couple of my favorite quotes regarding collectivism. The first one is from Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said, "My humanity is bound in yours, for we can only be human together." So really thinking about what it means to be part of a community and relying on each other. That's what a community is about. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates, and this is from Between the World and Me, and he is an author. If you're not aware, this Between the World and Me is a great book. He's written others, and he also has wrote some of the Black Panther comic series and is working on the new Superman. I'm very excited about it. He said, "I would not have you descend into your own dream. I would have you be a conscious citizen of this terrible and beautiful world." Really thinking about who you are as a person and how you're going to exist and be within a community and contribute to that community and how that community will also support you. And going into this kind of with eyes wide open. And I think that is one of the best reasons to participate in community classrooms and learning from a community while you're in college. Related to this is the concept of civic engagement, and there's a definition. This is just a brief definition. There's lots of definitions out there. This one, I have some sources at the end of my slideshow, but this one is in there, and it says, civic engagement, individual and collective activities intended to identify and address issues of public concern and enhance the well-being of one's community and the society. So once again, it's that interplay. And I asked you all a question about some activities of civic engagement. I appreciate you all answering this. So most of you all, 86% of you, have talked about the news with your family or friends. Talking about the news and just being aware and engaged is a huge part of civic engagement. So is reading the local news where you are. So getting involved locally, knowing what's going on locally, also important. 45% of you all have read the Austin news. Work on that. There's some interesting stuff happening in Austin. Austin has, a really interesting history that is still kind of being played out today. And things definitely start locally. 69% of you all have voted. Also work on that. Voting is kind of the classic piece of civic engagement and having voice in your community. I realize that there's not always candidates that share your value system or your identities. Perhaps one of those candidates could be you someday. So things to think about. 74% of you all joined a UT club. 72% of you all have volunteered. So that's pretty huge. This term of civic engagement really is a fairly Eurocentric term. It's only been in the last decade or so that this term has been a little bit more decolonized organized and thinking about what this might look like, except for, just town hall meetings and communities and so, more and more definitions out there, but political engagement, social innovation, social entrepreneurship, which sometimes here at UT especially can really be linked with research, advocating for human rights and activism, working for social, economic, environmental, racial justice and equity. Community research is considered civic engagement and participating in furthering knowledge and so furthering the betterment of society. Philanthropy or fundraising is definitely part of civic engagement. Community engaged learning or internships, and then starting a movement. I don't think it's beyond thinking that one of you all could be starting a movement. So some things to be thinking about. One of the important things about this is that the more you get involved now, this will kind of set the stage for the rest of your life in terms of how civically engaged you are. The patterns and the behaviors that you start engaging in college are typically what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So if you get involved with advocacy, with activism now, you're more likely to do that forever. Same with voting, same with talking about the news, with your roommates. It's important to kind of set that stage now. All right, so let's hear from Madeline again, and I was going to also correct the caption from before. That Socks for the Soul is actually spelled S-O-L-E. And she's going to talk a little bit more about what Socks for the Soul is about and what her role has been. That's not this one. Here we go.
Socks for the Soul is a nonprofit and student organization made up primarily of social work students, but we have people from all different majors. And the goal is to provide socks and other under-donated essentials for unhoused individuals in the Austin community. So we
All right,
work
hold
with
on.
different sock companies.
Wrong video. Really? Does anybody know if this is a video we watched before?
Who donate
It is?
to us, and then we work with other organizations at the time.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I was really interested in talking with you is that, there are definitely internships and volunteer opportunities and service learning on campus, and the work that Socks for the Soul does and its structure kind of what we usually see with students. So I just want, again, to repeat that you all are a nonprofit and you're also student-led. So that means that leadership is completely done by students as well as your board. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the entire organization is made up of students. We have interns who are completing their service learning hours, but also just other students who are interested. And then all of the outreach that we do, fundraising, the nonprofit documentation, all of that is done by students, and just passing along the knowledge and experience to the next people who will be in those organizations.
Oops. So what's amazing about the work that Socks for the Soul does, and one of the reasons I wanted Madeline to talk a little bit more, is that this is an organization that's really going above and beyond. It was completely started by UT students, including this student who was a pre-med social work major at the time. And it's been going for several years now, and their full mission is to raise money, fundraising, and donations of socks, and then they work with local organizations who work with people who are unhoused to get those socks to them. So they made this, really clear, concise mission, and they've gone for it. Entire board is made up of students. So, making an amazing impact, and also, I know Madeline some, having amazing experience applying to graduate schools because of this experience that she's had. You know, being executive director of a nonprofit as an undergraduate student is pretty amazing. And, you know, it was something that she made happen. So, this, I think, this slide and the importance of this topic cannot be overstated. Really considering your identities and your comfort zones when thinking about choosing a community classroom or where you might fit. And I think the other thing I could have called this slide and thinking critically about yourself and the community that you might put yourself into is, are you looking for an experience where you need to see yourself? Sometimes that is vitally important. Or have you kind of seen yourself almost everywhere you've looked already? So what I mean by this is if you are a person who was raised in the United States, you're white, you're straight, you probably have experienced and interacted with a lot of culture that was already built for you. However, if you identify as a black or brown person, you're LGBTQIA+, you're non-Christian, any of these other types of identities, you really may have the need to see your identities and be in a place where your identities are validated and safe. And so thinking about this, when you think about what you're looking for in a community classroom is important. You're not making a commitment when you're doing any type of activity around this, that you're not making a commitment to do something for the rest of your life. So it's the perfect time to be making a commitment to something short-term that will give you what you need at that time. And that could be to be pushed and challenged some, and that also could be to have a place where you fit. So just vitally important that you think about identity and what your belief system and your values are when you're considering looking for one of these experiences. Yeah. Okay, so let's move into what do community classrooms look like? And I'm going to come back to the internship example. I also think this is really important. I was just having a conversation with a student who's looking at coming to the School of Social Work in the fall about internships just a couple days ago. And she was asking me what looks better on a resume, having an internship or volunteer experience. And what I told her was, it doesn't matter, really, because everybody, there's so many people calling things internships. And I've known students who have signed up to do an internship during the summer. Maybe it was within an organization they were really interested in, a nonprofit, and they got there and they realized what they were going to be doing was filing. And that was called an internship. And then I've had students who have had a similar experience and gotten to a nonprofit and realized they were going to be working, you know, as an assistant to the executive director. And that was an internship. And so people are calling lots of things internships. People are just calling summer jobs internships. It doesn't matter if it's called an internship if it doesn't give you the experience you're looking for. So ask a lot of questions. I put a lot of examples on here. These are all the things that could be considered an internship. Volunteer work, paid work, doing something related to your interest, doing something that might be somewhat related to your interest, work that you don't get paid for, work that's connected to UT, work that you found on your own. It's just that term is everywhere now. So don't stop when you see internship. Make sure you ask questions. Is this really something you want to be doing? Yeah, important stuff. So benefits of community learning, and some of these we've already started talking about. Skill development, absolutely. Engagement, Links to the real world, so testing things out. Do you want to just try what it feels like to be doing, XYZ role in the community? Participating in some sort of community learning could be a really good fit for that. To be learning about resources, to be developing references. This is on the individual side again, but it's so important. Especially if you're thinking about grad school events eventually, or jobs when you graduate, to have that experience and have somebody who is willing to give you a reference. To be making a difference, to be sharing your lived experience, learning about yourself is just huge. There's no better way to learn about yourself than to try something and make a mistake. We're going to talk about mistakes in a few minutes. So what makes community learning the most meaningful? You've mindfully chosen. You're not just doing something because you did a search on Indeed and it said that it was a summer internship. That might be the easiest thing to do, but you may find that it's just a really long, tedious summer, especially if you're not getting paid. Having the ability to reflect on what you're doing and how it's tied to your learning is important. And so if you're able to find a class that includes community learning, service learning, volunteer work, clinical work, instructors are going to push you to include reflection in what you're doing. Ability to make mistakes. This is huge. So when you're in one of these roles, if you're a UT student, you're identifying yourself as a learner, it's kind of expected that you're going to make mistakes. I think mistakes are totally underrated. And I think part of that is because we don't hear adults saying in our lives typically, or at least I didn't, I just made a mistake, I'm going to do it differently, or apologizing. But making a mistake and then embracing the learning that comes along with that. It's so important that you have the opportunity to do that, and this is the type of work that will allow you to do that. And then forming relationships. And you'll hear again from a couple of the students talking about how relationships are so important to the work that they've done. Tying community learning to your passions. You have to do this. And I just want to quote Idali from her video earlier saying, I really wanted to help my community. So yes, there was the work about voter rights. That's very important. It's important for social work. Voting is part of human rights. All those things. And to her, she wanted to help her community. So finding that passion. So I think we have enough time for this. What I want you to do, and we're just going to take a minute to do this. I want you to turn to somebody around you, tell them your name and your pronouns, and tell them what passion brought you to your major. What passion brought you to your major? And then if you have time in this 1 minute, what's your ideal community classroom experience? Has anything resonated with you tonight? If so, what? Okay, ready, set, go. You have a minute. Especially tell a really big audience to do something like that, and they just do it. So what I'm hoping for you all is that, Gabe, you were like, yes, this is a reminder of why I'm doing this. Why I'm in college, what I'm studying, and how this potentially could be tied to some community learning. So kind of remember what you said, remember what you heard as well, and see if it kind of helps you as you leave here. Okay, so career planning, we've talked about some of this a little bit, but in terms of career planning, I am still hoping that some passion is bringing you to your career. And that a lot of times these experiences can really help you kind of test the waters. Even in social work, we have students, I mean, in our kind of second big social work class, students have to do service learning. And we have students who sometimes do that service learning and then come back and say, oh no, I do not want to be a social worker. And it's really hard to be a social worker if you don't want to be a social worker. So, testing the waters and then, modifying your goals, pivoting, okay, maybe this isn't where I want to go, this is not what I want to do, or confirming, this is exactly what I want to do, or this is part of what I want to do. I want to have this focus. Really, discovering unknown opportunities, new majors, new roads that you could take, and really seeing yourself. That's really good stuff. By the way, I didn't talk about informational interviews in this, but I think they're so important. Just making connections in the community and talking to people who are doing stuff that you might want to do. I've already talked about some of this too, and I know we're starting to get short on time, but skill development, some things I haven't talked about, communication, prioritization, and accountability. I know most students are now coming into UT with work experience, but especially if you haven't had work or volunteer experience, just getting some of these skills. Knowing how to communicate with a community member, send emails, send texts, make commitments, change commitments if needed, call in sick, all of the things can really help you develop as you're working towards a career. Finding out about yourself, learning some flexibility is important, and we've already talked about mistakes. All right, some challenges as we kind of finish up. Time. I mean, time is huge. How many of y'all are working outside of school right now? That's a lot of you. Time is a huge issue, and hopefully we're going to have a few minutes from you to hear from you, Dolly, at least one more time about, trying to figure out how to fit this stuff in. Course load, working, family commitments, health and mental health. Since I have y'all as an audience, I will tell you right now that we're seeing a lot of trauma from the pandemic, y'all. If you all are thinking, I feel like I'm kind of having a hard time from the pandemic and all the things that I went through as a member of a community experiencing a global pandemic, that is because that is a thing. There is this kind of, collective a concept called collective trauma, where you all have been through something huge together that is still going on, and so thinking about health and mental health and fitting in community learning, it can be a thing. Money, absolutely. And I'm going to talk to you about money in a second. And then not seeing yourself in this role. Maybe you're not seeing yourself as a person, maybe you're kind of shy, you're not used to kind of putting yourself out there. This is a great time to just try it. Even if you just take an experiential learning class, it can be good. All right, so let's watch a couple last videos, and then I have just a few more thoughts, and then we'll go for questions.
Is that you also work full-time.
Yes.
And so how do you make all this happen?
Yeah, so the nice thing about some of the service learning that I was able to get was, for example, when I became a water deputy, it was on my own time. So I didn't have a block schedule where I had to be there, you know, at this time, except when I got the training. But it was only at one time, and then after that, you know, it was on my own. So, you know, I would go to work. So I would go to school in the mornings, and then I would go to work, and then, you know, even at work, I would be, oh, you know, here I am, and it was kind of funny because at that time I was working at a yogurt place back in El Paso. So I actually ended up having, so when I was here my first semester, I was a water deputy for Travis County. So when I went back to El Paso, I did it over there. And I was working at a yogurt shop. And sometimes people would be like, can you show me the vote? And then I would do it there. And that's how I get my service learning. But also when I did SWAD, which is a social work advocacy day, they were so helpful. And they were so nice. The main person that was in charge of every social work student that was volunteering, she knew we were students, and she knew that we worked. And so, you know, I would, you know, go to school again, go to work, and then I would get home, you know, send some emails out that I would have to do. You know, and it never took me more than like 10 minutes. It was always like 10 minutes, and all the work was very like laid out for us. In a sense of like, you know, we had a list, this is what we did, and we did it on our own time. So that was really helpful. And another thing that I think really helped me get it, because I'm not saying that it's like an easy layout and that, you know, being up for 12 hours a day, just going back to back is easy. But also what helped is like, I was really passionate about what I was doing.
And I'm just going to go back here actually. So once again, it's a lot easier to do the work, right, if you're feeling really passionate about it. Don't volunteer to do something if you're not feeling it. And Logan, I'll just summarize, talked some about, you know, seeing his schedule at the beginning of the semester and then just scheduling, knowing, okay, I've got this like 2 hours here and another 2 hours here, and that's when I can fit in an internship. And that's what I'm going to do. And so being really scheduled gives you the opportunity to kind of find time for this work. So addressing challenges, it never hurts if you're doing volunteer work or you're inquiring about volunteer work or an internship or any other type of work, including research, undergraduate research, to ask about pay. And say, you know, I understand I'm reaching out to you about a volunteer opportunity. I'm so passionate. I really want to do this work. And I'm wondering if there's any possibility for pay. And then you kind of have to make a decision about it or not. There is a lot more attention being paid to unpaid labor, especially around you know, college student age, when you all really could use the financial support. It does not hurt to ask about pay. Other ways to address challenges, reach out to your faculty members. If you have an instructor who you feel really connected to or connected to the topic, ask them. I'm really interested in an internship. I'm interested in learning more or working on a project. You know, what do you know? Who do you know in the community? Can you help me find someone? Taking on a small role or a project, especially connected to a class, is huge. Looking for a role that's already part of your academic path is also huge, and I'm going to provide a couple of resources for you that you can look at the websites for and kind of look for some things that might fit, so it doesn't, you know, take so much of your time. And then also just make it your own. There's lots of stuff now that is available virtually, you know, opportunities that are available nationally, internationally, because of the virtual world opening up more. There's a place for you to, you know, kind of get this experience if it's something that you want. So I'm going to leave you with this. These are some resources for you and just a couple shout outs. Even if you're not a member or a part of University Leadership Network, they have an amazing website. If you look at finding an experiential learning opportunity, there's a huge list of ideas. Please check it out. And then also, if you're not familiar with the Bridging Disciplines program, It is also a great set of programs to check out. It gives you the opportunity to kind of have a secondary area of specialization and pursue a certificate. And it's all interdisciplinary work, and you can really make it your own. So there's lots of resources on campus. Talk to your career center. Yeah, I hope this has been helpful. That gives us 4 minutes for questions. That's not a whole lot, but I really appreciate y'all's time tonight.
Yeah, can we all Before you get up, we do have time for one question, and it's one of y'all's. So, the question we'd like to ask you tonight is, what would you suggest we do to get started on how we could create community service learning experience if we're not in the College of Social Work or Ed or Nursing?
Yeah, there's so much out there, you all. I mean, I think probably the first step is if there is some issue that you would like to advocate for, there's just something that you're like, okay, environmental justice, you know, that is really close to my heart. Take a look at, just do a Google search. What nonprofits in Austin are working in this area? And reach out to them and see if they're looking for a university student. Or check out the University Leadership Network website. It's a great place to start to look at, and they also have some links to different postings that are specifically looking for UT students. The other thing that I didn't put up here, which I should have, is an app called Give Pulse. And it's basically a place that community organizations will post looking for UT students to volunteer with them. That's also a really good place to start. Or talk to an instructor. If you have an instructor who's doing work in an area you're interested in, talk to them. Go to office hours, stay after class. We love that. We want to talk to you and hear what you're interested in. It's a great question.
And thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.